One of the most impactful things that I've learned as a student of Mike's is the importance of making good choices in training and always working on building momentum. This presentation is about that. Invariably, almost all of us at one point or another have hit weights in training and then thought to ourselves, I wonder if I had like 10 more pounds in me, or I wonder if I'd be able to hit this for a big PR. I know that I have many times, and probably too many times I decided right then and there, stupidly, to just go for it. It's an emotional response to drive for success, and it is ego-driven. And that is not to say that this is a bad thing. The ego can drive men to do many great things, but generally training may not be the best time for the ego to come out. That's not to say that you shouldn't go for PRs in training, but with every decision we make, there's an opportunity cost. I'd argue that training in general is no different than any other arguably mundane decisions. It's a great analogy for life, in my opinion. What should my volume be today? What should my top set be? How about drop sets? How many drop sets? As simple as that sounds, choosing to do a certain set at a certain weight in training precludes using a different set and a different weight. Pretty simple in concept, and that should be common sense. And because we know that human willpower, or for at least the duration that I train daily, isn't limitless, it's as much a resource as your glycogen stores or the amount of time you have. You probably shouldn't spend it aimlessly. This is from a training session that happened last week. It came down to getting to my top working set, and then I had a decision to make. Fortunately for me, I decided to put my ego in the corner and I ran some napkin math, and that's kind of where this presentation kind of started from. So the question I wanted to ask myself, if in a daily training session, how can I maximize my volume for the limited amount of willpower that I have in that day? So we come to the training dilemma. For this particular example, I was doing back squat triples up to 7, 8, and 9 RPE with 6 to 9% load drops. So that's pretty high volume and pretty high intensity. I'm doing triples. For purposes of this example, my first set of that I was on the scale at all was at 335. And you can see my volume, 1,005 pounds. So that was a pretty good starting set. I probably overestimated this because I went straight for 370. So in essence, I made a bad decision in training to go straight to 370. I hit it, and it was about an 8.5 or a 9, somewhere in there. And so you come to the point now, what's next? What's my next set going to be? Well, I can go one of two directions with this. I haven't quite hit my 9, but I definitely hit a PR. I probably could have done 370 for 4. And that today is also high volume, high intensity training. So from this dilemma, I've got two scenarios. Scenario one, I'm terming high risk. This is me deciding to just go for it. I hit my first 2 sets, and then I throw 380 on the bar. This is all theoretical at this point, but I would assume that I may not have made that set. I can assume safely, I think, that I probably wouldn't have made that set based on how I felt that day. So I would have called 380 by 2 a 10, and my volume would have been this, 760. Well, from there, I've already lost a good deal of volume. So I go to my drop sets at that point, and I might get 2, maybe 3 drop sets in. So in this scenario, I can also safely assume that if I had done 380 for 2, I probably could get 345 for 3. And it probably would have been about an 8.5, because I'm basing that off of my 370 for 3. Let's call that my 9 at that point. So I would do my drop sets based on that. And so that puts my ranged between 348 and 337. 345 is still within my fatigue drops. So some of you might say, well, how do you know you only would hit 2 sets? I'm basically making an assumption here. That is the assumption that I have to make to make this example work. And on that given day, those 5 sets probably would have taken me about 20 to 25 minutes or more. So at that point, I start running over time very quickly if I don't, keep things moving along. And so at the most, I really only have time for 5 to 6 sets total. So in this scenario, we end up with a volume of just under 5,000 pounds. Already you can kind of look at this and see that there are some problems. First off, I went over on RPE. I try very hard to stay within the RPE ranges that I'm given. And in this case, if I had done this 380 for 2, it would have been an attempt to massage my own ego. And from that, the consequence of that opportunity cost really is that my volume for that particular movement for that day would have been lower than it probably could have been otherwise. And really, like, in the big picture of this is this 380 for 2 would have been a short-sighted effort off of the long-term goal. So let's move on to the second part of the scenario, the second part of this this dilemma. This is the scenario that happened, actually. I'll just go ahead and put that out there. I actually did this. The first 2 sets were the same, but instead of going to 380, I actually started my drop sets right then and there. I went 345 for 3 at 8, another 1,000 pound added to the volume. Then I did 2 more drop sets at 345. So already just that 1 extra rep at 345 versus doing a double at 380 was higher volume for me overall. Now, some might say that, okay, well, your intensity training is important too. But if you look at the protocol and you understand that the intent of this is to get volume in, if I'm doing 6 to 9% fatigue, that's pretty high volume. That's less about intensity and more about volume at some point, I think. So on this given day, I think I made the correct move, and my training today, where I hit 385 for a triple, definitely, I think, kind of proved that. I think Roy Andrew put out an article a couple weeks ago about optimizing your volume and thinking about what was the training session that led up to your PR. And I think this is one of those situations where that gets highlighted. So in this scenario, I maxed out my volume. And not that I do 3 drop sets at 345, but I actually did an extra drop set at 340, and just got that extra set in. And it was still within my fatigue % range. So my volume, if you compare the volume from this scenario to the high risk scenario, there's significant difference in about 1,200 pounds. And from this is really what we want. I actually really mentally fought with myself to not put weight on the bar. I actually started putting more weight on the bar after my first set at 370, and decided that I wasn't going to do that. That I was just not going to do that, even though I really wanted to see if I could get 380 for 3. And the result of that is that I maxed out my volume on that day. I think I got as much work as I could have done in the amount of time that I had. And this is, based on the protocol I was given, I think this was in line with the long-term plan. So why does this matter? I might be misinterpreting the intent of this quote, but something that really stuck with me was something that Mike Zordo said in one of his presentations, is that adaptations are related to training volume, not muscle damage. Well, I think we harp enough that volume is probably one of the most important variables in your training, as a lifter, in your lifting career. You should be striving to increase your volume over the long term. Certainly you're going to have some days that are lower volume and some days that are higher volume, but overall the trend line should be up. So really the whole point of this isn't necessarily for me to sit here and rant about a training session that I had last week and how I made a good decision in training. That's kind of not the point. The real point is kind of getting back to one of Mike's cornerstone articles on momentum and building momentum in training. And this is something I tell my athletes all the time is to try and make good decisions, or at least make the best decisions that you can in every training session, in as many training scenarios as you can, because your willpower isn't limitless and you don't have unlimited time or resources. And the only way to really get the most out of your time and energy is to try and make the best decisions possible as much as possible. And that in and of itself, I think, is a skill that nearly every athlete can develop and continue to work on throughout their careers. Hey everybody, some of you watching this may have seen some dude hanging around with Mike Tushir at Nationals this past July. Well, that was me. I've been completely blessed to have had the opportunity to work for Mike since April, and since then I've been working behind the scenes as his editor. I'm also one of his athletes, and I come from a little bit of a different background than most of the lifters that I've had the opportunity to meet. I grew up as a competitive swimmer for about 16 years. From that, I had a good fortune to be able to swim NCAA Division I for about a semester at the Air Force Academy. I came to work for Mike as one of his clients, pretty much just looking to get stronger, to be more competitive in CrossFit. And the fact that him and I are both Air Force Academy grads pretty much established a basic common ground that we both kind of understand where we're both coming from at any time. But needless to say, it wasn't too long after I started training under him that he offered me the opportunity to be his editor, and I totally jumped at the chance at that. So here we are. And this brings me to why I'm doing a video about this particular topic that I'm going to discuss, and I'm not writing an article. I thought it would be a great way for me to explain it a little more visually rather than typing pages and pages of text. Plus, it gives me the opportunity to put a face to a name, since I've been working with Mike for a little while now, and people really don't know who I am. So thought I'd introduce myself.